Hello and welcome to my latest career video on my retired playlists in career video month. So next up, is Jim Hall, a relatively unknown fighter. We will go through his career. So let us start at his main opponents. And Jim Hall starts out with a 6-fight series. With the great Bob Fitzsimmons. Now Jim Hall wins 2 of those fights. He loses 3 and he draws 1. He also then fights Joe Choinski in a trilogy, scoring 1 win, also suffering 2 defeats, and he fights and loses to former pound-for-pound rated contender Dan Creedon. Next up is former pound-for-pounder Frank Slavin. Jim Hall fought him on 2 occasions, scoring wins on both occasions, and he also fought the Irish puncher Peter Marr, fighting to a draw. Next up is contender Mick Dooley. Jim Hall fought him on 2 occasions, fighting 2 draws, and then he also fought a 4-fight series against one of his rivals, Peter Boland, scoring 1 win with 1 loss and 2 draws. Next up is Tuck Ryan. Jim Hall defeated him. Good evening, Martin. Good to see you, buddy. He then also fought Ed Dunkhorst in a singular fight, fighting to a draw. And the final name on here is contender Jim Scanlan, who Jim Hall defeated. So Jim Hall there, has 22 fights highlighted, punctuated by those 2 big names, with a 9-fight series. Big shout out to Bruce Gass in the chat. Good to see both you fellas, as always. So he's had 9 fights against Fitzsimmons and Choinski. He's won 3 of those and drawn 1, with 5 losses. He's beaten both of them. So he's done actually well against them, and he's beaten some of the good fighters. So there's Jim Hall's basic career breakdown. Doesn't have a massive career for the time, compared to some fighters we've seen and more we will see going forward. But let's go on to the first of his stat slides now. Jim Hall scored 39 knockouts, 12 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 4 in the first round. Now Jim Hall scored 1 KO against Champion, 1 KO against Hall of Famer, and he scored 3 KOs against pound-for-pound fighters. Jim Hall scored 0 KOs against rated fighters, being a pre-rating era fighter. And in terms of rounds boxed, he fought 476 professional career rounds. He fought 0 title fight rounds, 25 rounds against champions, 45 rounds against Hall of Famers, and 73 rounds against pound-for-pounders. Now, as highlighted prior, he's a pre-rating era fighter, so he has 0 rounds against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters, or ring champions. So there's Jim Hall's first stat slide. When we go on to the first of his more niche opponent categories, champions, Jim Hall had 6 fights, including 2 wins, 3 loss, 1 draw, all against the same fighter, Bob Fitzsimmons. He beat 1 individual champion, of course, the aforementioned Bob Fitzsimmons, and also scored knockout over 1 individual champion, the same Bob Fitzsimmons. So really not too much to go on there. Choinski, he also fought in a trilogy. He is a Hall of Famer, but he's not a champion. Other pound-for-pound rated fighters from time, like Frank Slavin, Dan Creedon, also were never champions, but very good fighters. So on from the champions onto the Hall of Fame category. Now, Jim Hall had 9 fights against Hall of Famers, including 3 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw. The 2 individual Hall of Famers he defeated were those I mentioned on the career breakdown, Bob Fitzsimmons and the excellent Joe Choinski, and he scored knockout over 1 individual Hall of Famer. That was Bob Fitzsimmons, who was also the champion that he stopped. And on to the pound-for-pounders, where Jim Hall has his highest fight tally. He had 13 fights against pound-for-pound fighters, with almost a split record of 5 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws. Now, the 3 pound-for-pounders he beat included the champion and Hall of Famer. He beat Bob Fitzsimmons and Joe Choinski. He also, twice as highlighted on his career breakdown, defeated former pound-for-pound rated contender Frank Slavin. And he scored knockouts over 2 individual pound-for-pounders, Bob Fitzsimmons, who he also stopped as a champion Hall of Famer, and of course Frank Slavin. So a sliding scale, he had least fights against champions, more against Hall of Famers, and more against pound-for-pounders. Now Jim Hall does not have the large diverse career of many contenders or champions or Hall of Famers or all-time greats from this time, but certainly those 2 fight series alone, 9 fights against Fitzsimmons and Choinski, is a tough run, and a tougher set of fights than some modern fighters fight in their entire careers, just against 2 opponents. So there is the Champions Hall of Famers and pound-for-pounders. When we go on to the next slide, it is rated opponents. Now, as highlighted, Jim Hall is a pre-rating era fighter. So he has 0 fights against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters or ring champions, and thus he holds wins over 0 rated fighters and 0 rated fighters. He scored knockouts against, obviously, fighters like Fitzsimmons, Troinsky, Slavin, Creedon. Many of those guys would have been top 10 rated, top 3 rated. Some would have been, well, Fitzsimmons would have been a ring champion. So ultimately, sadly, he doesn't have those, but he would have scored numbers had ratings been around. So on to the next to last slide, his title record slide. Jim Hall had 0 world title fights. Now, one thing I've always pointed out on these videos is, you know, nowadays, if a fighter is denied a title fight for 6 months or a year, they suddenly make out that they've been badly done to. But when you look through boxing history and through many of these videos, big shout out to Surrealist Idealist, good to see you. When you look through these videos, you realise so many fighters, even very talented contenders, or fighters who could have easily been world champions in a 4-belt era, you know, never even had a title fight. Now, many people will say it's one denomination or another denomination that never had title fights and were frozen out. But actually, it's more even than you realise. Even though the colour line, I've always said, is one of the most hated things in boxing history to me. Okay, I cannot condone it and I cannot rectify it. Okay, ultimately it was to me an evil that happened. Those fighters were treated, you know, in a terrible way. They were denied so many shots. But that doesn't also then remove the fact that many very talented fighters from the more established line also did not get shots. But the difference with them is when they didn't get shots, they generally didn't suffer lynchings and other horrific events. So basically, Jim Hall had no title fights, no title fight record, no defences or KOs. Now, obviously, with no title fights, he has no wins against top 10 fighters, top 3 fighters or ring champions in title fights. He also has no wins against champions, Hall of Famers and pound pounders. So for the last slide on the video for Jim Hall, his titles one slide, obviously, with no title fights. He won 0 world titles. He was never a lineal champion, nor was he an undisputed champion. So there is the video for Jim Hall, a relatively unknown contender, but a tough little fighter. Didn't have the largest career, but had a very tough career for his size in the era. Okay, one of many contenders to come. Now, when I did these playlists before, 1890, 1910, and then I was going into 1910, 1930 era. This time on the 1890, 1910 fighters, I'm mixing them up now. I'm going 1890, 1930, and just putting whatever fighters to cover all the pre-rating era. So then when we go after that, every fighter should pretty much have full rankings for the playlist. But you know, there's going to be more fighters covered on the 1890-1910 period and the 1910-1930 period than I was originally going to cover. There's about 15-20 fighters who I didn't do videos on in the 1890-1910 period last time. They are being covered this time. So there's my latest video. Okay, over coming week, many more videos to come. I'd like to say a big shout out to Surrealist Idealist, Martin Dunstan and Bruce Gass. Always appreciate your guys' support. Fantastic guys you are. You've shown me nothing but love on this platform, you know, and I've had many conversations with you and good interactions. So long may it continue, and thank you very much. And I will get off now, okay, to get working on another career. So I am the Boxing Librarian. Everyone have a peaceful Saturday night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'm out for now.